Occasionally I hear Matt Dillahunty talk about this book that he says he's working on. Basically, the premise is if he were God, and I think his title is actually If I Were God, with the idea that if he were the omniscient creator of the universe, this is how he would do things. I ended up thinking about this specifically because I recently saw a video that talked about biblical passages in which it was declared that the Lord made mankind male and female. This is an argument not only used against transgender individuals, but often against gay, lesbian, and bisexual individuals as well, because, well, there's still this perception that in order for gay people to have sex, one of them has to be the man and one of them has to be the woman. Before getting into the topic itself, though, I do want to point out, in complete fairness to the video's author, they said that they thought that this was metaphorical, which I don't think is a really good way for an omniscient deity to run the universe, but that's a topic for another day, I think. But it got me thinking, because really, if I were an all-powerful, omniscient being, and this was something that was very important to me, this male-female dichotomy, I probably would have done things a little differently. For example, I probably would have made all the criteria easy to match. When it comes to talking about male and female, we tend to go on multiple criteria, including genitals, reproductive organs, genetics, all of which are typically in alignment, but not necessarily so. I often see things like gender identity and sexuality dismissed as being part of psychology or other quote-unquote soft sciences, but this goes to things like physical biology, physiology, and genetics, and that's stuff that is generally what STEM advocates will rely on until it disagrees with them, of course, and then it's SJWs corrupting the academic process or whatever. Things very likely weren't so muddy when the Bible was being written. People didn't understand DNA. They didn't understand internal sexual and reproductive organs. They had a very loose understanding of the external ones, too, for that matter. But times have... what's the word I'm looking for? Oh yeah, changed. Things are different now. We know more things. Kind of like that whole Pluto thing I was talking about. I mean, when I was growing up, maybe it still exists, there was this urban legend that Jamie Lee Curtis had XY chromosomes, which as far as I know is not true. But it's technically plausible in the sense that biologically female individuals have XY chromosomes out there. And the thing is that most people don't actually know their chromosomes, so when a chromosomal argument is made, it's generally an ignorant assumption. We tend to assume that if somebody's born with a vagina, they have XX chromosomes, and if somebody is born with a penis, they have XY chromosomes. As time goes by, we develop a better understanding. This is how we learned about sex chromosomes. This is how we learned about reproductive organs and how the reproductive process actually works. This is how we've learned more about a lot of things, really. We can better quantify things. And as time's gone on, we've discovered that there are more and more people with chromosomes that just don't match their physical sex. So the Lord created us male and female, so the Bible says a couple of times. What criteria did the Lord use? Now, me being a flawed and non-omniscient being, I would think that creating people whose genitals don't match their chromosomes would probably be a bad way to go, especially if you're somebody who claims to not be the author of confusion. Again, I'm not God, so maybe there is some grand plan here. But I think if I were to instruct my people on how to live their lives and the male and female dichotomy was so important, I probably would make the genetics match. And if I hated gay and trans people as much as the Lord is reputed to do, I probably wouldn't have created them in the first place. But again, I'm only human, so what do I know? But given the technology of the people in biblical times, and that does span a fairly large era, but none of them exactly had CSI Las Vegas going on, so it's still valid. I mean, you would think that it would have to be based on external genital traits because they didn't really understand reproduction, and they certainly did not have access to genetic testing. Although the same people will generally use chromosomes as an argument against transgender individuals. Having surgery doesn't change who you are on the inside because you still have the chromosomes you were born with, which is technically true, but they usually say that somebody born with a penis is XY and somebody born with a vagina is XX. And that isn't necessarily the case. And you probably can't tell somebody's DNA by looking at them. If you can, please contact me. That's a really cool power. But if we are talking external genitals and secondary sexual characteristics, then we have to deal with intersex individuals. At least, I'm not really sure the nomenclature. I saw a bunch of websites that said visibly intersex, and I don't know if that's like going to offend a bunch of people or not. I have no idea how to phrase this, but intersex people, not in the sense of like their chromosomes not matching their physical traits, but intersex is in having like mixed traits of multiple sexes. And there's been a apparent rise in intersex individuals, but I'm not sure that it's actually a real rise, because until a couple of decades ago, quote-unquote corrective surgery was very common, and the surgery choices might not reflect your chromosomes either. But since this is so important that it appears in the Bible multiple times, the Lord created the male and female, well, how do you reconcile intersex individuals? Now, you might be able to hide intersex individuals, but they don't go away. They don't stop being intersex. It doesn't change that they were born with genitals that don't fit the normal male-female dichotomy. So you have to address this on some level. And considering that this was declared by an omniscient God far before there were genetic tests and far before the reproductive cycle was fully or even remotely understood, then how did the Lord, who declared that everyone was male and female ostensibly, how did the Lord manage to reconcile these people? How were the Lord's people supposed to deal with somebody who was visibly both male and female? The lines were never clear, but they've gotten muddier with our understanding. As time has progressed, we have learned more things, and we can apply them. Was God wrong? Did God fuck up? Or did the people who wrote the Bible simply not understand sex at that point? I'm going to go with the last one, but then again, I'm an atheist. I don't really believe a God exists to have fucked up or been wrong. So this is a problem, though, when the beliefs you preach contradict scientific evidence. And before the STEM lords step in, I'm not talking about psychology or gender studies or any other quote-unquote soft science. I am talking about genetics and biology. And there's a good number of geneticists and biologists in relevant areas who will agree with LGBT and intersex individuals. So yeah, I mean, it's really not surprising that modern-day scientists know better than a bunch of Bronze Age people who were trying to explain the way the world works back when they still thought magic existed and the sky was a solid barrier. Thanks for listening. Amaranth, out.